And here we go with more melody writing, the Sarabande at the grade 10 level. When last we met before our commercial break, we had the Theory 9 Sarabande looking like this. And I encourage everybody to start the grade 10 Sarabande by writing a grade 9 Sarabande first. The beginning steps continue identically. And here we have the grade 10 version. If you haven't done it already, sneak down to the link provided below and print out the PDF. What you'll notice is that the melody of line 1 is exactly the same, and so is the accompaniment for bar 4. The balance of the bass clef notation for line 1 reflects a grade 10 two-part counterpoint style. The one thing that we need to notice is that at the end of this phrase, we have to say HC in E minor. We need to identify the key along with the cadence. And when we go to the lowest phrase, we notice that if we're working on rounded binary, that's our choice and the first one I will do, it can look identical to your grade 9. So you can bounce down, do phrase 4, and you're good to go. Now let's take a moment to look at the instructions. Name the key, name the Baroque dance. Continue the opening, creating a 16-measure composition with 4 phrases, motivic unity, and a modulation to a traditional goal key. Use binary or rounded binary form with repeat signs at appropriate points. In there, the new elements are that you must include a modulation, that it must be to a traditional goal key, and that you now have the option of either binary or rounded binary form. Because we have a choice of forms, you must state the form at the top of the page. We continue to mark the structural phrasing. For the first phrase, symbolize the implied harmony using functional chord symbols. At the phrase ending, name the key and cadence type. We do want all inversions included, not just a sketch of what is happening with Roman numbers. For the second phrase, you must add a bass line and symbolize the implied harmony using functional chord symbols. So when we say add a bass line, this is after you have completed your 16-measure composition in the treble clef. So we do include the functional chord symbols again, and at the phrase ending, we must name the key and cadence type. For the third and fourth phrase endings, add a bass line at the cadence, name the key and the cadence type, and symbolize the implied harmony using functional chord symbols. Those are all the expected things that are leftovers from grade 9. And you knew it would happen. We have to go right back to phrase 1 and analysis. What we have, once we look at the new notes, is the first bar is 1, passing tone, 1, 6, passing tone, 1. Measure 2 is interesting. The bass line is going down from the tonic in the previous bar to the dominant. And so we have melodic minor with no raised leading tone. So I've got a small 5 in first inversion. If you call it a 7, we understand and accept that, but the ear would group this together to be a small 5 in first inversion, followed by a passing tone, and then small 5 going to a capital 5 in first inversion. We get the D sharp in, and then we resolve that leading tone immediately over the bar line to an E, and we see that we have a passing tone and 1 in first inversion, neighbor note, continued 1 in first inversion. You can or don't have to write in that 1 in first inversion again. On the last note of measure 3, we have a neighbor note in the treble and a passing tone in the bass for non-essentials that lead to the dominant chord, and we're leaving our analysis from grade 9 where it was the 4-3 half cadence. We do have to remember that because there's going to be new instructions, we must write half cadence in E minor. Are we done yet with the analysis of phrase 1? Of course not. we have to go back and look at all of the intervals. In the same way that we did things in our grade 9 counterpoint, we need to analyze what our intervals are up and down with numbers 2 through 8, using a T for a tritone. And you will see that I have one other wonky interval in here that we will discuss in a moment. In here, 3 on count 1, and then I've got a 2 in brackets because it's caused by a passing tone and its oblique motion. There is not 2 notes sounding at the same time. 6, 7 in brackets, 8, 3, 3. And you can continue on and go, okay, what happens in bar 2? We've got an 8, 7 diminished 4 to 3. Well, that diminished fourth is an accented passing tone. What this does is it gives you the opportunity to use likewise what I call a delicious dissonance to make things sound lovely and to highlight a chord beautifully. After having a minor 5 chord, the whole idea of the D sharp is really brought to our attention by having that diminished fourth. And we look at that diminished fourth and say, our ear is going to think it's way out of place. That's hugely dissonant. Well, actually, the augmented fourth is the dissonant one. Diminished fourth sounds like a major third. So it's on paper it's dissonant, not orally that it's dissonant. So accented passing tones are ours to use, and think of enharmonicities up and down as well. As we go across, you can see that in measure 3, I've got all of my counts have consonant intervals. I've got my passing tones and neighbor tones causing 2s and 5s. And at the end of this, because of the implied cadential 6/4, we've got a 4-6 in the soprano over that bass line because it is a 4-3, but it has that intermediary 6 because of the bass line movement. And now we need to make a plan. Our cadences need to reflect our modulation. So at the end of the A section, we should have an authentic cadence in G major. And I have written in the logical bass line for this. And in measure 8, we should have a full bar of G. So our choice for this one, and the most common choice for traditional goal key from E minor, is the relative major G major in early Baroque dances. I will explore an example where it goes to the minor dominant, but this is not as commonplace. Notice that I also have at the end of phrase 3 the 5 chord and half cadence in E minor. So it's going to be back to the home key for that cadence. I have printed in phrase 2, the pivoting measure is bar 6. So that's the measure where we need to stop hearing the D sharps and start hearing the D naturals. And then somewhere in the middle of measure 10 to the beginning of bar 11, we need to smoothly return to the tonic key so that it's the half cadence in E minor sounds like it is a logical ending to that phrase. If you wait to the last moment to return to the home key, it will feel like that cadence didn't belong there. And now let's compose phrase 2. The first thing that I want to notice is what is the last note in the first phrase? The interval that ends one phrase and moves to the next phrase does need to make sense. Here, the last note is the leading tone, so the safest choice is to resolve it and start phrase 2 with the tonic. Now, I want to have phrase 1 be the tonic of E minor chord. So I'm using the same contour of down then up and notes of the E minor tonic triad, but different notes than in the first line. So we have a balance of something that is similar and will be heard as cohesive, and yet something that is different. In measure 6, we see that I've got written, this is the pivoting measure. So I'm trying to get a D natural in here to ensure that the D sharp we heard so strongly at the end of phrase 1 is now not part of our ear. Normally, bar 6 would not want to have counts 2 and 3 joined in a single Roman number. However, in the Sarabande, because we are accenting count 2, we can successfully do this gesture here and have the highest note of phrase 2 be the new tonic. In measure 7, you'll notice that I move through the predictable supertonic chord to the dominant and then to the tonic of G major. Can you end the A section in the dominant minor? Yes, in the Baroque period, this did happen. Take care, because there will now be more than one accidental. We have to change the key signature and change the leading tone from what was presented in the first line. For most of my students, I recommend going to the relative major because it actually is the absence of accidentals. So you can't forget any of those, and I consider it safe, but it is definitely a possibility to move to the dominant minor. So next, I recommend going on and just completing the melody writing aspect here. If for some reason you run out of time on an exam, you will then have all of the melody written, you will have all of your cadences in, and you will have a basic Roman numbers for even phrase 2, which means that you still have the ability to pass this question barely, but you can pass it if you're missing some notes in phrase 2 in the counterpoint. So in phrase 3, we remember that we want to start in the key of G major. You can see at measure 9, I've got the tonic chord of G major, B, G up to B, so that reflects the same type of gesture that we had in measure 1, just transposed to the relative major. Now, my second measure, you can see the exact same rhythm as we have in bar 2. On the downbeat of measure 10, I've got a C in my head. I'm hearing this as the dominant 7th of G major, resolving to the tonic of G major on count 2. Now, normally we wouldn't want that kind of resolution, but we're okay with accenting a count 2 with resolution in a sarabande. So I did go to the 1 chord of G major there, and then at the end of the bar on count 3, I moved to the 5 chord of E minor, and over the bar line we can hear the leading tone, the D sharp, resolving to the E natural. So that step over the bar is well again, and then I simply took the first 2 notes in measure 3 and put them in reverse order for measure 11, and then went up by step and did the same gesture in measure 12 that we have in measure 4. This time it's our 6 to the 5 portion of the cadential 6/4. And now let's compose the counterpoint. When we look at phrase 2, we opened with the tonic chord, and we can reuse the base of bar 1 in bar 5. Now this 1 chord of E minor pivots into being the 6th chord of G major, and then you can hear strongly the 5 chord on count 1 of measure 6, the D natural that changes our ear from thinking in E minor to thinking in G major is on that downbeat. And we're going to hear it again at the end of the bar in the melody. On top of all of this, if we just take a peek at the middle of measure 5 to the end of measure 6, we have the outline of the G major scale to support this modulation as well. Now, I did not go past an octave without the change of direction, but I did use the scale nicely here. In measure 7, I did the predictable, let's make a supertonic chord be our predominant, and it always works beautifully to have a sense of voice exchange where you see that the bass goes A up to C and the soprano goes C down to A. Yes, the soprano has a passing tone in it. You may or may not choose to put it into the bass clef. That is your decision. In the penultimate bar, the second last bar of a phrase or main section, it is very possible to have the most activity going in both hands at the same time, and that is why it would be highly appropriate to do that. And of course, we have the cadence that we had already planned right from the beginning. And yes, check your instructions. Even excellent papers have missed steps. And before you're done, the other things on your checklist are your leading tones all resolving appropriately? Do you have a range that has not passed an octave in a single gesture? Do you have the accidentals in place for your modulation in both the treble clef and the bass clef? Have you used melodic minor in a minor key? Avoid those augmented and diminished intervals. Check for tritones, check for augmented seconds. Also check that cadence points in phrases 3 and 4 have no parallels at the two voice sections. And here you have it, the completed melody. The rests, as mentioned at the heading, are optional at this level. And in the ARCT level, those spots that are full of rests will also be full of notes for counterpoint. Now, this particular example has been composed in rounded binary form. Sarabandes can certainly be in simple binary form. The way you look at composing the counterpoint for phrase 2 is the same. It is just an alteration in how you approach the composing of the B section's melody. You're done.